the patient's goals are. How many people have their patients write their goals out and their functional limitations, like I can't do the following 3 things because of my back pain? Raise your hand. Okay. It's a really important question that you should have on your intake form. What are the 3 things that you want to do that you currently cannot do? Right? And that's a wealth of information. Now you've just tied not only their clinical condition, because you can figure that out, like with dry spells, one can't tie behind your back, right? But you've just figured out what the patient values, what they want to be able to do. And then, of course, that's going to give you some information on what their functional limitations are and also how to tailor their exercise program specifically to them. Nothing is worse than going into a chiropractic office and every single low back pain patient getting the same exact exercises. It's just not great care, to be honest. Everybody has, I'm not going to say you're still going to have some of the same exercises. Like everybody gets, the following 5 exercises. It just shouldn't be like that. Everybody's got different functional limitations. All right. So again, this is a nice little chart for you. You have it in your notes. If you're looking for strength and power, you really want to do 3 to 6 RM, repetition max. High intensity endurance and speed, you're talking about 10 to 12. And low intensity endurance, you're talking about 20 to 25. So if I've got a marathoner and I've got to put them through an exercise progression, they're doing many, many higher reps than somebody who's an Olympic lifter. There's been a lot of studies that have come out, especially recently, that looks at not just the weight or the resistance or the force that's being used per band, but also the perceived exertion for the patient. Now, we currently don't use these in our practices right now, but we may, in fact, incorporate them in the very near future. Because we want patients, we want to know what their challenge is, we want to know what their perception is of the exercise. Because we might say, wow, they're kind of in a fair amount of pain, maybe they shouldn't be doing green. But yet the patient's perceived exertion is, light. Well, if it's light for them, well, it's too easy. We need to get them into this somewhat hard, moderate range. And there's many, many scales. There's the Omni scale. This has been vetted throughout the literature many, many times. Again, somewhere in the middle of the scale is where we really need to be. And again, this is another scale that was developed by TheraBand, again by Dr. Collado. And you've got easy, low, moderate, hard, or maximum. It doesn't really matter what scale you use if you decide that you want to use that. The important thing to understand is that your patient should be exercising in the moderate range for them to get the best physiological response. So again, how do you progress the bands? You see the color progression, that's pretty easy. If they can do, just a typical patient, right? If they can do, let's say, 3 sets of 10, and there's no pain, and there's really no fatigue, and they're falling out of a moderate level of exertion, then you can just ask them. You don't actually have to have them fill out a survey. You can just ask them. Well, then they probably need to be progressed, right? And also, one of the things that came up in a couple other classes is that, well, should we double the band? Like, can I just fold over the red? No, because that what you're doing is you're actually doubling the resistance. When you move from band to band color, you're actually only increasing the resistance by about 25%. Okay? So don't double the bands. Just follow the progression as the colors are listed right there. Thank you. Now, in addition to progressing the bands, and I'll pound away at this for the next 6 hours, you got to challenge them. You got to go through the same types of exercise progressions. So let's take the shoulder patient. Well, actually, I don't want to do that because I'll show you that. But think about what we did with the abdominal bracing, and how can we add a band, or how can we add a flex bar, or how can we add a stability trainer to increase the challenge to the system? That's how you always have to be thinking. How can I progress this patient, make it more functionally challenging, and get them to a higher level of physiologic function? So to Virginia's question, do they stretch out over time? Yeah, they do stretch out. And again, you can look at the data, but at the end of the day, you should just be inspecting your bands, because you could have a very new band that somebody just poked with a pen and had a hole in it. Next thing you know, it's going to snap. What should the elongation be, guys? What's the maximum elongation it should be? Well, it's going to blow at 500. That's correct. What do we do in our practice? 200, right? So really, that's where you want to be. All right. So things that you need to think about as it relates to elastic exercise. Are you using it for resistance, or could you be also using it for assistance? Are you managing eccentric control? So when we did the Brugers, again, I said the exercise starts when we're working the eccentric range of the movement. If you've got a patient that's doing this, it's a waste of time. An absolute waste waste of time. Think about the vector that you're training in. And are you doing a specific activation exercise for a specific muscle group, like let's say lower trap? And are you incorporating other body movements to create a stealth exercise? So again, the body gets used to firing a muscle without thinking about it consciously. Functional resistance, moving them into functional activities that they're going to be doing. And then, of course, the dosing principles, which we just talked about. All right. Eccentric control. Eccentric contractions are more efficient and often more functional and require a lot more control. So what are the typical conditions that we must apply eccentric training to? What are the typical types of conditions? Okay. Sorry about that. So a concentric contraction, can I borrow your hand, please? Okay. So a concentric contraction, isometric is the body doesn't move. The muscle fires, but the body doesn't move. No joint movement, right? Concentric is the muscle shortens while I'm contracting. Eccentric means the muscle is actually lengthening, but it's still contracted, it's still engaged. You're controlling it. It is the quote-unquote negative, like you go to the gym, you do bench, right? And then all of a sudden you're coming back real slow. It's the negative portion, the eccentric proportion, the lengthening portion of the movement. All right? And so a lot of times, whether it's at the gym or whether at rehab, you see people doing this. I mean, you're getting nothing out of that. Right? If I want to train a patient who's got, I want to give you the answer, has a condition, I'm going to make sure we're working very, very slowly through concentric and even slower through eccentric. Now guys, this is important, really, really important. What is the type of injury or the type of condition that always should be getting eccentric work? Not strains, not sprains, although I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it for that, because you should, because it's an important part of rehab in general. But automatically you know what you got to do with what types of conditions. Huh? Chronic tendinopathies. Okay? Chronic tendinopathies, you must deliver eccentric exercises to your patient. In fact, in certain tendinopathies, you don't even want to have a concentric component. I'll give you an example. Watch me first, and then I want you to try this at home. Try this at home. I have lateral epicondylosis, right? Because a lot of times these tendinitises aren't really acute inflammation. They're chronic inflammatory processes. And so now I need to do eccentric training for my extensor muscles in my forearm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend my wrist. I'm going to take the band. Just watch me first. Watch me first, guys. Okay? My wrist is extended. It's my right arm, my right elbow. I'm going to load the wrist, and I'm going to come back very slowly. Right? It's a full flexion. So I'm eccentrically unloading the muscle, and I'm getting a stretch at the very end. Now you try. Take your right hand, stick it into the band. Bless you. Okay? Extend the wrist, load it. Notice I am at end range and parallel, right? And then unload eccentrically. I'm not moving the arm. Just the wrist. Now notice I'm not, watch this guys, I'm not loading and then extending the wrist again, because that would be concentric. I want to completely unload and not do a concentric contraction. So I unload, extend the wrist, stick my fingers in the band, and then unload. Elbows right at my side, yep. I'm not really trying to internally rotate the humerus. You know, it may be happening a little bit. It's mostly wrist. Did you see that back there? Sorry. Yeah, so I'm externally rotated, not almost the full range, but close enough where where my wrist is essentially, my extension is parallel with my band, right? Because I want to be at a 0 force angle. And then I just eccentrically unload. It's almost like playing guitar. If you never play guitar, I might be able to relate to that. Okay, and then just unload. Very good. Okay? You got that? So that's a really good exercise. When patients come in and they have lateral epicondylosis, we start with that, and then we progress to a more complex exercise, which I'll probably end up showing you guys tomorrow. All right? Very good. So now we understand eccentrics, right? So when do